Hey, folks, thanks for joining me here today. I am excited. I'm looking forward to going over this topic. I'm going to give the system just a few seconds to kind of warm up. You know, it likes to do its thing, right? And let me show you this. Now, what I want you to do as you're joining in to this master class is I'd love for you to let me know exactly what industry that you're in. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about your background, where you're from, what brings you to this masterclass on AI adoption playbook, because we have so much to cover. And the more that I get to know some of you folks, the better it will be as I incorporate some of the learnings within our masterclass today. And before I even get started, you know, I had all week, I'm like doing a super deep dive, right? I started with the newsletter on AI adoption, and then I did a mini training. And then I was like, well, there's so much more that I'd love to share. So I want to make sure that I'm covering as much as I can and also in as much detail as possible, but in a way that it makes sense, because we know a lot of this information can be a little bit overwhelming too, right? So I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna totally like redo some of the training because I'm looking at some of the folks, not only that I did research on in terms of AI implementation and what that looked like, but also some of the folks that were signing up. You know, what's their background? Where are they coming from? What did that look like for them? So I thought it was important to make sure that I'm incorporating the different aspects of this training, this free masterclass for you, so that you can get the most out of the training as well. And I'm going to look over here to my notes and just make sure I didn't miss anything. And I'll just periodically check in. I can't see them all the time, unfortunately. So I don't want to leave anyone out. And I want to make sure that we get through everything we have in store for you today. So, when I first um, thought about, this topic here, I really wanted to kind of do a deep dive on this. I wanted to make sure that I was really covering as much information as possible, but in a way that it actually made sense, right? Because I think that we often get caught up in which tool makes sense, but we don't always talk about what happens behind the scenes, right? How did we get here? What's the reason? So I want to start by kind of telling you something that might feel a little bit uncomfortable to some. And I think that the biggest challenge really with AI adoption, it isn't picking the right tool, it's the technology. You know, it's not the budgets, it's not even data quality, because I talked to some businesses and they have a really healthy budget, and there's enough for not only adopting the AI tool, but also implementing it and training. But I think that everyone thinks that, that's the biggest challenge, but your biggest challenge really is leadership, specifically like how you frame the problem, how you communicate the change, and how you build confidence in something new when people are already tired of change and skeptical of tech promises. I've been a number of meetings on both sides of the table in the boardrooms, and also, talking to leadership and saying, look, this is what we're looking at changing. This is what we're looking at implementing. And you hear instant sigh, eye rolling, frustration. And I can totally get that. And I've watched this pattern repeat across companies every size. And if this is relatable, go ahead and put a fire emoji in the comments. As a startup founder who moves fast and builds excitement, gets 90% adoption. And enterprises with a 5 million AI budget, they get 20% adoption. So same tools, same vendor even, but completely different leadership approach. And here's what really sets them apart is that the leaders who win, they understand this. They understand the AI adoption and how this works for them. And I think that this is where things can get a little bit tricky because if you're a founder, your job isn't to find the perfect AI tool. Your job is to model not only the excitement about the change, but also understand what this change means to your business. So it requires you to move fast, visibly, and also celebrate early wins so that your team gets really comfortable about these type of changes. And if you're scaling, and that's your background, and your job isn't to integrate perfectly, your job is to standardize first, then automate to build process discipline. And then you want to layer in AI to make people really heroes by making them 3 times more productive. And so if you're looking at what that looks like for them and you're monitoring what their production looks like, and you're like, okay, well, I see a big difference in comparison to what it was before to what it is now. And you know that you've already implemented this AI tool, and that's really what made the huge difference. So they get to look like a superhero. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. It's not just the tool, it's the knowledge, it's the expertise that goes behind implementing this particular AI tool and whatever that may be. You have the background, so you get to take a different perspective. I was talking to someone who has been in sales for over 45 years of his life, right? And he says, every time I'm in a meeting and I hear someone read off what they sent to a client, I already know that it's been created by ChatGPT. There is no soul to it. There's no emotional connection to it. And I think that's the part that everyone is afraid of, you know? So you have to think about where can you humanize your approach as you implement AI. And if you're enterprise, your job isn't to solve for compliance all in one day. Your job is to build governance rigorously and to pilot ruthlessly. And then you want to celebrate publicly, because this is how you get to show everyone the different hurdles and where you are in that process, and then create a coalition of believers before you actually scale. Because one of the things that you'll probably notice is that if you don't have believers on your side, it makes it really difficult to get that momentum going and that buy-in. I remember hearing this all the time in my boardroom meetings, you know, in terms of buy-in. And I thought, wow, this really holds a lot of weight in terms of what people are willing to do and also how leadership is positioning this. So the tool that you pick, it does matter, absolutely. But it also matters to 30% of the solution. And leadership's approach, well, that's 70%, right? So here's what we're doing today. We're building a framework that works across 3 stages because the change management principles are the same. But we're also giving you a stage specific tactics because your constraint and your context, they're going to be a little bit different, right? And we're going to prove something that no one's talking about. A small business using mature platform like HubSpot or Salesforce. And I say a mature platform because they are past experimenting, right? They're what you would consider perhaps a legacy program. And then AI came about and they understood clearly what the client needs and they listened to their audience. So they knew how to implement AI in really smart ways. And so you can absolutely win as a business, a small business, you know, not eventually, not after 2 years, but, you know, right now. And I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of folks don't understand. If that makes sense, go ahead and post what resonates, you know, with you in the chat. So I think that what our focus needs to be here as we move into this next phase of our masterclass with the AI playbook is that we need to look at the different parts of leadership and their framework that works at every stage. So every leader that I've seen succeed with AI adoption, they follow 5 principles. You know, they're true whether you have 10 people or 10,000 people. There are certain things that just don't change regardless of how many people that you actually manage. And I think that you get to understand that, especially as you're in leadership more and you gain more experience. And I'm talking to are probably people who have been in leadership for a long time. So you really get what I'm talking about when I say that. And this is leading by using and not only by mandating. So I've been in spaces where leaders they're just really super busy. I was talking to a physician not too long ago. So they're managing a practice, right? They're managing the front office, the back office. They have a small team as well. And we're talking about adopting this AI tool that could be very beneficial to them. And their thing is that, look, I just don't have time. I want to make sure that my team understands how to use it and then they can teach me how to use it. But the thing is that they may not use it in the same way as this physician may use it, right? So I think that is really important that you don't just say, everyone, hey, adopt this AI tool, but you say, hey, I've been using this AI tool for a week, and what that may look like, even for with someone with a truly busy schedule, is that you are really clearing your schedule for 30 minutes or an hour, or maybe you're blocking off a half a day, whatever that really looks like, so that you have the opportunity as a busy leader to focus on how this particular AI tool or platform would actually work for your small business. So in the case of this particular physician, I said, look, I know that you don't have a lot of clients that are coming in on Thursday. This is probably your slowest day. So rather than you open up the entire office for just two or three clients to come in, what you want to do is just, keep that blocked off. It's advance notice. We don't have to call and cancel any appointments or anything like that. And that's important to this physician as well. So that gives us the opportunity to block off some time so that they can just focus on how they would implement this AI tool within their business before the team actually even gets a chance to see it. So here's what I found. What this looks like is that the physician was able to implement it into the workflow or say, hey, look, I like certain elements of this particular platform, but it doesn't work for me as a small business because, and they give a specific reason. Either it takes too long to adapt or it doesn't interface within their internal programs. You can't get that connection. Something is broken, perhaps, or it parses over only certain pieces of information, whatever that looks like. But the upside is that you get a chance to actually show the work and then you can reference the tool in a meeting and you visibly use what you're asking your team to use. That's the best and the biggest buy-in, right? Because why it works is that people don't just follow policies, they follow the people that they trust. And if they feel like they can trust you, when a leader says, hey, look, this is important, but they never touch it. And you'll be surprised what your team may know. They know when you go to lunch, they know when you're back from lunch, they know when you're out of a meeting. And you're like, wow, it's an uncanny thing, right? They're already showing up at my desk and I just got off of a phone call. Well, that's their job. Their job is to know these different things and they're paying really close attention. So they may be able to also understand based on the language that you're using and the different directives and the conversations that you're having that you've not touched this particular AI tool as a leader. And so I think that people need to know that this is really important, that when a leader says, this has changed how I work, and you see them using it, then the people want to understand it, right? So this is how you get a chance to have a true buy-in and how you get firsthand access. That makes sense, right? Because if you see someone using it, how many times have you actually gone on to make a purchase, but you actually look at what the reviews are saying before you make that purchase? You may not even be familiar with the product, but you've seen enough people say this works in this particular scenario. It sounds like it matches what you need, right? So it's an instant match. So if you have a VP, a good example of VP in sales is Scaling, SaaS company. And she had a team of about 8 salespeople. She implemented HubSpot lead scoring AI, right? Bad approach. Guys, here's a new lead scoring system. I want you to use it. I'm telling you, and I know that some of you can relate, but from what I'm seeing, I see it so often where it's just imposed upon. They don't even include the key players, the important folks that need to be in the room sometimes when they're making this selection. And so adoption was only about 25% in the first month. So what she actually did is that she spent 2 weeks using the AI herself, right? And she found that it accurately identified her best deals. So in the next team meeting, she said, look, I've been using this lead scoring for about 2 weeks, and I realize now I was calling the wrong prospects. So if she's calling the wrong prospects and she's not using the AI platform accordingly, she's not going to get the results that she needs, right? So this is shifting her pipeline. And here's what happened. She showed her work, her specific deals, her results, and then adoption quickly went up to 87%, right, in the next month. Same tool, different leadership approach. And so it really is all about, what this looks like for you. So I think the other principle that I really want to focus on is clarity on the why before the how. And I'll tell you what this looks like and why this is so important. Because before you deploy anything, you answer like, why are we doing this, right? What problem are we solving? What does success look like? And how will this change our lives? That's one of the biggest questions. It's like, what is this going to do in terms of making our work life better? Is it going to improve it? And not AI is important because we need to stay competitive because just using AI doesn't necessarily make you competitive. But understanding how you can use it to get ahead, that's really where there is a complete differentiator. So, yes, our customer support response time, let's say 8 hours, customers are frustrated, it's costing us churn. But if we get response time to 2 hours, we keep more customers, which is worth, let's say, 200K a year to us for this customer service group. And here's how we're going to do it. So let me tell you why this particular approach works. When people understand their why, what they're trying to reduce, they don't need supervision. You don't have to micromanage them. They figure out the how themselves. When you skip the why, you get compliance, right? People do what you say, but not commitment. And there's a big difference. That means that when they have the opportunity to not use it, they're not committed to it. They're not going to apply it to their day to day. So people care about the outcome. I remember training someone and they kept saying, like, why? Why? And I thought about, when my kids were a little bit younger and everything was why. But once they understood the why, everything else fell into play for them because it's like building blocks, right? And then after they understood the why, then they connected the how themselves, what that meant to them. How is this applicable? So I think that what's important to understand, let's say if you're an early stage software company with 15 people, a founder wanted to deploy ChatGPT for proposal automation. That approach, definitely against it. And I said, they were like, well, we're using AI for proposals now, and here's how we do it. And I've mentioned this before in terms of making your workflow more efficient, that you could use it, but when should you use it? Why should you use it? What is the gain that you're hoping to achieve? So what actually happened is that the founder spent about 30 minutes in an all hands on explaining the problem, right? Saying, look, I'm spending about 18 hours a week on proposals. That's about 45% of my time on writing, not selling, and it's slowing us down. And I've been testing ChatGPT for proposals and just kind of researching it. And they're saying, look, it cuts their time down to, about 45 minutes. And so they gave a complete breakdown. It's about 17 hours back per week. And if all of us do our bottleneck, then we free up about 40 hours per week as a company. And then he showed his process. So from that, because there was the work that was implemented, then you can show the adoption. So everyone understood, oh, because we always talk about like what's in it for me, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, I totally get, what's in it for me, how this can benefit me as well. And I think that this is important to also understand what is in it for the team, not just what's in it for you and how this makes sense. So you want to also kind of incorporate these other processes and you're actually showing the work, right? What does it look like? You don't say, hey, everyone adopt this tool. Real examples, here's where we are now, here is where we could be. But if you're actually not working within the AI platform, then it's almost impossible for you to actually say what the benefits are. You just have someone else's account of what could potentially happen without having a real world example, right? And so you want to look at the best optimal approaches, what could be working, what's not working. And then you want to celebrate your early wins publicly. So what this looks like is that you don't wait for perfect data to celebrate, because if you do that, people will also know that you're holding out on information and they may be hesitant. They're going to think, well, if you're holding out on this information, then perhaps that what you're saying is going to happen, this particular AI tool that we're adopting is really not that good, right? But what you're showing them is that we're in the early stage of celebration. We have reached a milestone. And I want everyone to know that because everyone was involved in implementing information into this AI tool from the very beginning at least 95% accuracy, we now have this amount of time that we were able to gain back in our day, our time. So you don't want to wait until you fully adopt. And I think this is also important because one of the things that I've learned during implementation with AI is that you have certain wins that are going to be more important than others. So even early on, this win actually may be more important than when you get to, let's say, 90% of the implementation phase. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to this. You're focusing on what these changes are, because you may find the first one and you celebrate it loudly and publicly. And then you want to make sure that you're letting folks know how it works, why it's important. So I think that it's really critical to understand that you kind of got to get your hands dirty to understand what this really looks like, and how it can also benefit you, right, as well. That makes sense. Because once you get into it, you're like, oh, I don't see a win yet. And then you need to kind of establish and break that down. So I want to give you another example in terms of an enterprise healthcare company. This is a pretty large company of about 800 people, and they were deploying AI for patient triage. And I've dealt with companies that, Fortune 500 companies that often would actually bring us in as to consult with and have people on hand to handle some of their triage situations. And the goal was that they're trying to make sure that they address the patient's concern as quickly as they can. And as quickly as they can, meaning that they may have a 24-hour, 48-hour turnaround time, or perhaps they want to make sure that they're addressing the patient's issue within 5 hours if they meet specific triage criteria. So this particular example, they wanted to deploy AI for patient triage. So the first month was a quiet pilot, one team. They didn't want to incorporate everyone just yet. And they got really good results, but no celebrations, so no one knew exactly what was happening, what's going on, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? Month two, results are really, really strong, but the CEO just mentions it like in a general town hall meeting. And in fact, it was like a newsletter that came through and it got lost. For one, people didn't know that there was a triage system that was being implemented. Okay. So they have no clue what is being referenced. You're already losing people. You're already losing the buy-in. You're losing the trust. Now, month three adoption is about 30%. So one patient outcome story, right? A nurse used AI recommendations. A patient got expedited to the right care and also better outcome. CO tells the story in an all hands on meeting. And so then month four adoption, it jumps to 68%. And so the main thing that happened is that in the all hands on meeting, they were able to explain exactly what's happening, right? Why they're doing what they're doing with the triage program. And the story worked better because it also wasn't just focused on metrics. It's actually focused on someone's real life to know that, okay, well, this patient has a better treatment plan now because we use AI. They have a better understanding that if they follow this treatment plan, that they will receive better care, or they have perhaps even longevity of life or a better quality of life, whatever that looks like. And so these things are really important, that you're not just only talking about the metrics, but you're also putting the story behind the metrics as well, right? So I think the main thing that we want to focus on here is that you want to build a coalition before you scale. And so what that looks like is that you don't pilot with the easiest team because they'll adopt anything. You pilot with your most skeptical team. And the reason why I say that is because I remember sitting in a room of about 5 or 6 people, and they had a lot of questions, and they were already skeptical about the program. And they were like, well, does that mean that I'm going to lose my job? Does that mean that, someone else is going to replace me? Maybe who knows this better than I do? And then they also had some really, really great questions specifically about the process as well. So all of these are good questions. They are all questions that need to be addressed and they need to be answered, right? And so if the skeptic says, this works and everyone else believes it, then you also can identify champions. So the skeptics that I've learned that have worked in these different groups, they're also change management leadership. So that means that they're understanding what the program looks like, how it impacts their department, and also how it impacts the clients that they serve. So they have a different set of lens and a different perspective. So they came in thinking, I'm not going to like this. I'm going to tell everyone else, hey, forget this AI tool. Don't even bother to use it. But going through the process, they say, okay, well, here are the pros, here are the cons. Here's what I think we can do differently, because you may not have known this, but our department has had a workaround for the last 5 years, and it requires these extra 4 steps. I'm now realizing that adopting this particular AI platform or this AI tool will help to eliminate that workaround, which means less manpower. They can focus their time and attention and their expertise elsewhere. So you get to identify these champions, right? 2 to 3 influential people per department, and you invest in them. They become your cheerleaders. They become the ones that not only tell you, hey, this is good, but we need to focus on this particular area. Something is not happening in the system, in the process, that we need to look at this a little bit further. And so one enthusiast doesn't move mountains, but a coalition does. And now you have a group of people, because it's now fair implementation. They're not just looking at the benefits of AI, but they're also looking at, look, I brought this to the CEO's attention. They said they're going to look at it, and they actually did. And here are the benefits, here's what is changing for us in a really good way. So I think that you want to look at how you want to scale, how you want to deploy it, and the important parts of what's really, really relevant. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to go over to comments and just making sure we're not missing anything before we continue. And if you're just now jumping in, I want to thank you for joining the AI Playbook. And we are really diving in really deep, because we're not just talking about AI tools that you can implement, but we're also going behind the scenes. We are discussing the importance to the logistics and mechanics of what happens behind the scenes and how you implement it in the different phases. We talked about leadership. We also talked about CEO and SaaS companies. We talked about the different ways that you can make sure that you're incorporating the process within. And the reason why this is so important is because anyone can get on here and show you a really great presentation, right? They can show you the latest and the greatest AI tool and the flashiest part of it. But the part that you really need to understand is what happens behind the scenes, implementing something and deploying it so quickly in a day. Is there a true benefit? What's the short-term and long-term implications? And that's actually what we've been going over, and that's what we are discussing today. So I want to take a moment. I'm going to stop sharing before I jump back in. And if you feel like you have gained a new insight or a new perspective, I'd love for you to let me know in the chat. And again, also invite any of your coworkers or people that you think will find this information very valuable as well. And we talked about the leadership framework and the five principles that work at every stage. So leading by using it and not mandating. And the reason why that was important is because you're showing people how you actually use the program, why it's important, what the impact is, right? And you get to identify the different upsells or additional jobs that may have been created due to AI adoption. So I want to also go back and focus on the key insights for small businesses as well. And I think that it's important because there are people that are running a business on fumes, right? You are the only one, or you have a very small team, and you're doing all of the things all of the time. And what that looks like is burnout, right? You don't get a chance to get the rest that you need. You don't get a chance to focus on the business in the way that you should. And I think that it's important and very relevant to understand when I say legacy or I say programs that have already been built, like HubSpot or Salesforce. They're not only just for larger businesses, but they work very well with smaller businesses as well. And the difference is that I've seen some smaller businesses and they look like they're from back in the 1980s. They have a stack of papers. They're very unorganized. They're still trying to figure stuff out, even though they may have been in business for many, many years. But the part that they have not incorporated is the organizational piece, right? The part where you can jump into any part of your business and understand exactly what's happening without additional support or without it taking hours. And if you've ever have worked for someone else before you actually started a business or opened up a business as a founder or small business, what you will probably have identified is that these larger companies, they have invested in the foundational programs, right? The programs that capture client information, the programs that help with proposals, the programs that help you to understand the gaps within your system. And most businesses, small businesses, don't understand that they also need to adapt these programs within their system. And so when ChatGPT came out and Claude and the LLMs, we flocked to it. We were amazed by it. Like, okay, look at all these wonderful things, but it's almost like going to a bookstore and getting lost, not knowing exactly which the book that you want, where to find it, where does it go. And LLM can be a lot like that, in that, yes, you can do so many different things with it, but which specific task should you use it for, and does it actually benefit your business? Is it going to do exactly what you need it to do? So I think these are things that are very important that you want to focus on before you jump right in, and you want to look at the foundation. And even if you had been in business for a long time and you have a system that perhaps has been working, you also want to look at what changes that you can make so that it just makes more sense, that it is now more efficient for you, right? Because the goal is not only to just run a small business, but to continue to make improvements along the way. And then to find out where you can grow, So whether you're just starting out or you've been in business for a long time, the key insight is for you to understand where you can continue to be scalable and expand. Most people go into business, they don't just say, well, I'm just good right here. And those that do say that, they don't understand the efficiency that they need so that they can grow and they don't have to be stressed out on some of the smaller aspects of things, right? So we're looking at the different ways that deploying software can work and the enthusiasm that can move mountains as well, right? So now I want to jump into, we focus on that, small business owners, if that makes sense, let me know. So we want to look at how we measure and communicate impact and not just effort, right? And so what that looks like is that you want to look at not just how many people are using your tools, but also you want to look at what's the business outcome? Are we faster? Are we more accurate? Are we keeping customers longer? Are we making money? And you must communicate this consistently. And the reason why it works is because adoption without impact is just compliance, and impact without communication just gets forgotten. So um, there was a health tech company that we worked with. Their biggest issue is that they wanted to figure out how to get to more phone calls and how to also become more efficient. So the problem also that is that there were a lot of drop-offs with the phone calls. People were calling back in for the same exact issues. So what they were thinking is that this health tech company is thinking, okay, well, we're going to need to hire a whole new department so that they can answer the phone calls faster. But what they really needed was they needed a better AI platform that would actually let you know when your phone calls drop off. Did they hang up during the phone call when they were receiving directions, extensions? Where did they hang up because the extension connection didn't work? And so what they did was they test piloted a new AI program, and it allowed for them to not only track the phone calls, but also understand that the extensions were not valid. The extensions that we're saying, okay, we're going to transfer you to, were the wrong extensions. So they needed to update the system. Them updating the system also helped for them to connect the right people to the right departments, which stopped callbacks for the same exact issue, frees up people to do other things with their time. The other issue that had been identified is that they were also understanding that besides not responding to the same issue over and over again, they also realized, okay, well, after the attendant on the phone, the customer service rep is finishing the phone call, they are keeping that line connected, which does not allow for another phone call to come in. So once they tally up all that time, because there was a large number of people on the customer service team that was doing this. And part of the reason that some people said they were doing this because they need to capture notes. They wanted to make sure that they were up to date before the next call. So there are a couple of things that needed to happen. Internal process needed to change. We need to figure out how to get to notes a lot faster, how to update the system quicker. So it's not necessarily just about adopting the right AI tool, but it's also about capturing the right data analytics, capturing the right metrics to identify what bottlenecks that you have within your business so that you can make those changes. So adoption without impact is just compliance, and without communication, again, like I said, it gets forgotten. So I had two companies, same tool, same team size, right? Company A, 85% of their team adopted the tool. Company B, they were just responding 60% faster. So that's cutting churn by 6.08%, right? Which is worth, doesn't sound like a lot, but it's worth 400K a year in retained revenue. So what adopting really looks like is actually impressive, right? So company B is winning, not because adoption is higher at 85%, but because impact is clear. You know exactly what is changing. So in the client that I have presented to you, where they implemented a new AI customer service platform, it showed exactly what the impact was. It meant that they didn't need to hire an entire new department to funnel through these phone calls. They just needed a more efficient way. And they also needed a platform that would capture exactly what's happening. They know something is wrong within the system, but what's wrong? Where is it wrong? Where can we change it? What can we fix, right? And so this is the part that's really important. All right, so let's talk about a couple of myths about what's holding you back. And here's what I'm hearing also from small business owners and founders. So those enterprise platforms we talked about, like HubSpot and Salesforce, they said that they're just too big, right? We're too small. We need something lighter, cheaper, simpler. But if you look at these companies, they have done exactly that. They have created something that is lighter, simpler, easier. They have even um, free subscriptions that you can sign up for that allows for you to actually test it. So you want to explain the why, you want to be able to show the numbers. And it's not just a CRM, right? It's a CRM and sales automation and service automation. So some of the things that I've been noticing also with working with small businesses directly and asking these questions is that they get caught up in the sales automation process, that process of feeling like they have to call the client back or they want to follow up or they want to make sure, hey, you didn't forget about me. But when you incorporate the sales automation, the service automation, ops automation, and then you add a layer of AI as well, for small businesses, this is dangerous, right? But in a really, really good way. So just thinking that if you have the right platform that has a system built in. So we're not just talking about like a one-off, like I created a proposal or I created a thank you letter, but you're actually talking about a full CRM system that does a full cycle. Is doing a what if scenario. Okay, well, what if you hadn't received a response from this client in 30 days? Well, I want you to follow up and say, hey, I want to invite you to have a conversation. Here's my calendar. Or I want to invite you to the next program that I'm offering that I think will benefit you. So these are things that are happening behind the scenes. They're already layered in, right? The second reason is that AI is native. So when you use like an inexpensive AI tool where you think, okay, well, this is a little bit cheaper. So I'm going to use this one. I want to make sure we're in the right place. Okay, good. So yeah, so when you're using an AI, that's a little bit cheaper. And what you have to also be mindful of is that you're going to pay for cheaper. And if you didn't think that cheaper is expensive, it is. Let me tell you how you're paying for it. You're paying for it because it may not actually work. It may not actually do what you need it to do, right? Therefore, you are creating additional steps or processes or even having to pull people in to accomplish this thing that this cheap AI program was supposed to do. So the friction is complex, it's integration. But when you use different programs that are seamless, they already know what they're supposed to be doing. They've been in business for a long time. They know your data. They know that when you plug in this percentage of 35%, how to make it go across the dashboard, what impact it has for you. Does that mean it's a drop off? Does it mean it's an increase? Does that mean that there are more people that are visiting or signing up for your services, programs, websites? Does that mean that you have fewer patient drop off? So it's giving you all of this great information when you have the right program. But if you're using a cheap program, and I've done it all the time where I'm like, okay, it looks like this is going to solve what is important to me. And then I find that there's a huge drop off because it's not matured yet. It just isn't ready. And so it's sitting on the shelf. It's not working for me at all. It doesn't benefit me. However, I have already invested the time, the energy, the effort, going through training and trying to get to learn this platform to figure out how this can still work for me. It can't. It was a cheap program. Okay. Sounded really great, but at the end of the day, it just didn't work. So you want to look at these different legacy programs like HubSpot, pricing per seat. If you have a really small team, there's no need for you to buy 5 and 7 seats because they're not actually using it. So you want to focus on the people who actually need access to the data. Who's actually putting in information? Are you just reviewing it? Because if you're just reviewing it, you don't necessarily need a seat, right? Because they're just looking at the data, they're not manipulating the data. So small businesses with about 8 people using HubSpot or Sales Hub, roughly $400 a month, $50 a user, let's say. So you get sales plus you get operations plus AI. So if you brought a lighter CRM, let's say $20 a user, plus a separate AI tool, $50 a month, right? Plus Zapier automation, maybe another $20 plus a chat bot. I've seen a lot of those. Oh, just incorporate the chat bot, but you're paying $100. Now you're paying more, right? With all these little different AI programs that you're trying to piece together and connect and kind of Frankenstein, and they're just not working. So you just want to keep that in mind that now you're paying for more when you thought you were going to be paying for less. So scalability also is already built in. And the reason why I'm spending a lot of time talking to my small business owners, because I know that you're here in the room, you're perusing by, you're stopping in, and this information is going to be really valuable to you. So you can understand that, oh, well, I thought this was unattainable or out of reach, but this is something that is actually doable. Another thing that I also tell small business owners is to look at your subscriptions and figure out what can you cut from what you think is necessary. You know, how often are you using this particular subscription? How valuable is it to you? Just make a true assessment to how important some of these things are. And then I also meet my very, very frugal business owners. I get it. I know what you're trying to do, but then you also have to look and see, does this weigh the pros and the cons? You know, you go out and spend money on a very lavish dinner, but then you're very frugal on a system that could save you hours and make your internal processes very, very efficient. So there's some adulting and some, business focus and refocus that you'll need to do. So if you built on a lightweight platform, you're just ripping it out and moving to something bigger. So you want a platform that actually can grow with you. You can think about that. There are a lot of these other programs that I'm talking about with HubSpot and Salesforce. I'm focusing on them so much because they are legacy programs, and they also have developed smaller programs, smaller subscription plans that fit smaller businesses, right? So it just makes sense. And this allows for you not to have to learn something brand new and start from scratch. You don't have to start from scratch on this one. I think people underestimate the total implementation in terms of having to start from scratch on a program. That you've already spent a lot of time on, a lot of effort, a lot of money, and then you're like, okay, well, I learned that, and it took me about 3 years to get really perfect. And now because I have grown and I've scaled, I can't use that tool anymore. So you just want to think about these smart decisions and just see if it's something that is scalable to you, right? Because the numbers, when you look at tech services and how much you're going to be spending, this is a really good breakdown. And then we also looked at the early stage that could work for you in terms of ChatGPT, how much that subscription costs, or Firefly, AI, Intercom, Zapier. So all of those different things. And they're for different stages based on your business and where you're needed at the moment. So you just want to also focus on that as well. And before I jump into something, I want to make sure. Okay, great. So, all right, small business folks, we have covered a great bit. I wanted to make sure that you understood all of the implications of cheap and expensive, what a good system could do for you, what the benefits are, right? So now I want to talk about the early stage startups and the speed of survival. So we may need to go back just one. Excellent. All right. So here's what I want to do. I really want for my scale up folks in early stage, my early stage startups. I want to give you a really, really clear picture and a reality check of what this looks like, right? So let's say you have about 10 to 50 people and maybe about 5K to 5 million in ARR. And some people will probably say, well, Simone, that's probably a little bit more. What you're talking about is not exactly where I'm at, and that's okay. But this will paint a really clear picture for you. And when you think about founder involvement in everything, they're at every table, every decision, right? One, maybe two products, market fit question still unanswered, right? This is what this looks like for an early stage startup. And approximately zero budget for nice to have infrastructure. And then also a burning need to stay lean and move fast for everyone else. So the constraint here for early stage startups is, how do we build the best AI system, right? How do we get quick wins this week that directly impact revenue or survival? And I want to be really direct here because if you're an early stage and you're thinking about custom AI proprietary models or building our own AI advantage, I want you to stop because you don't necessarily have the luxury to focus on development. So you want to really focus on deployment. And early stage AI framework, it looks like this for the first pillar, right? Here's the framework. You want to pick one activity that is taking up most of your time and cash, and you want to deploy a solution in 1 week. And then you want to make sure that you measure the impact and then decide if you keep it. And that's it, because that's the system. And the reason why I outlined it this way is because I want you to understand what this framework looks like. You're focusing on what's taking up most of the time and most of the cash for early scale up stages. Okay. So what we're doing here is we're actually developing what this system looks like. And I work with B2B SaaS startups, and I'm going to call them Sales A, okay, just for an example. So they were at about 1.2 million ARR. They had about 12 people. The founder was spending about 18 hours per week on proposals per week. That is 45% of his time on something he wasn't even selling. He's only writing, right? The document to sell. So we did an audit of what he was doing. 30% of the proposals, that was repetitive template text. 40%, that was customized insights about the customer industry. 30% was pricing and terms, mostly standard. So actually, I would say maybe about 70% of his time was on repeatable stuff. So what we did was deploy a workflow, ChatGPT for the industry research section using publicly available data, a proposal template in Airtable, and a Zapier to connect them. So it may seem like it's complicated, but once you connect all of these different elements, they become the system and they start to connect and speak to each other, right? Timeline, Wednesday through Friday, was about 3 days of engineers from a contractor, and the cost was about $4,000, contractor plus tools for the month. So the result is that his proposal went from 3 hours to 45 minutes. And he started closing deals about 2.5% faster. And then 6 months later, it was the singles biggest productivity lever the company ever had. So the process for this particular situation was ChatGPT, which generates initial research and context, about 10 minutes. Founder customizes it and adds his perspectives. That was about 20 minutes. And then auto-populated templates, they fill in with final customization about 10 minutes. So the thing about this is that this was his preference, right? It wasn't perfect, sure, but he was able to deploy and have it working in about 3 days. And that is the early stage mentality. How quickly can I get this to deploy without using up too much funds? And there are other programs that you can also deploy where they have these elements already baked in. So you don't have to necessarily connect them. But what they found is that with this particular process, it gave them a little bit more flexibility for what they thought they needed. So the key question that you're asking right now is, well, what if it's not accurate, right? Because we know, what if ChatGPT makes mistakes? And great question, because it makes it all the time. All of the LLMs do, right? The answer is, that's why it's human review. That's the whole reason for double checking it and reviewing it, to make sure that it had his business brand baked in, his personality, what he stands for, his ethical views. So he can look at certain words, certain lines, and then it removes the grunt work because the founder still adds judgment, right? Nuance and also credibility. So the AI is just, it eliminates the research phase of it, and that takes about 3 hours. So this is the model for early stage, and AI handles about 70% repetitive work. Humans handle the 30% of that requires the judgment from it. So if you understand what we're looking at here, we're focusing on the actual work itself and not the process of the work and the time that it takes to collect all of the data and to do the research. And there are other platforms, like I said, that you can use if you don't feel like, okay, well, I need to have complete hands-on. We're talking about founders that are used to doing everything themselves in the early stage, right? They're used to being in all spaces at all times. So what you're not doing is you're not fine-tuning models on your proprietary data. You're not giving them information for them to give to someone else. That is still a very valid concern that is happening right now. They're using your real life data, your proprietary data that you have built and cultivated, and what has become your focus, right? Your goal, and using it to build other pieces of data. So you're not doing that with this particular process. You're also not building custom integrations that take about 6 weeks, which you may not have as an early stage startup. You're not hiring a data scientist, which you may not have money for as an early stage startup. And also, you're not waiting for perfect data structures because you don't have time for that. But you are deploying and iterating fast. So if something doesn't look right, you're taking it back in, you're revising it, and then you're putting it back out there within a matter of a couple of days, not weeks, not months. So let's talk about pillar 2. So the quick win here, and here's how you identify what you want to automate first. The first step is that you want to list what takes up most of your time. You want to spend 30 minutes and list every activity that takes more than 2 hours per week. And it doesn't require deep judgment, but it gets repeated regularly. Okay. So you think about what is it that I'm doing all the time over and over and over again, and I want somebody else to do, perhaps, or more efficiently, right? You think about that. So these are the things that get repeated regularly. Whether it could be writing the email, picking up the phone to make a phone call, could be scheduling, it could be fulfillment. Think about those things. And then also think about things that involve data that already exists somewhere else. But sometimes you're just like reusing information and it can be redundant. And you're like, well, I already have this information, but I'm taking the time to do more research and to find it and to look it up, right? So for most early stage companies, you'll get something like proposal writing, email responses to common questions, social media content ideas. It could also be customer onboarding documents. There are a lot of folks that also have a process where they give an automatic reply to a client based on specific criteria that has already been established. So when an email comes through, they're not looking at thousands of emails that they have to read and review, but also there are quick responses, which shows that when someone reaches out to your company, there's someone on the other end that is ready and available to quickly handle. They don't understand how that process works, but this is something that you have developed on the other end of things, right? There's also meeting notes and summaries, customer research, and competitive analysis. First draft job descriptions. I've seen people just rewrite the same job. I'm like, why are you doing that? It's the same job, same duties, unless you have made some changes to it. But if you haven't, these are the redundant processes, data entry, and then also formatting. So the second step is you want to rank by ROI. You want to ask these questions for each one. How many hours per week does this take, right? Across the total team. You want to look at that, make some adjustments. All right. And then you also want to look at like, how much is that time worth to us? I think that's the other part that people undervalue. How much is that time worth for us? I spent 5 hours on something that I could have spent somewhere else, you know, that was really critical. So how much is that work? How much is that worth to you? Hourly cost times hours times 52 weeks. That gives you a more accurate breakdown, right, on what that looks like. And then also you want to start with your top 3. Don't do all of them. I see folks, they put down a long list of things. You are not going to be able to tackle all 15 things across the total team. What you can ask if you have a team is for them to write down their top 2. And then you would look and you would make an assessment from the entire department, the entire company, and you would evaluate it based on importance and relevance. And so you want to start with the top 3. right? Because you literally cannot tackle all of them realistically and think that you can truly make an impact. So for a sales flow, it was proposal writing, right? Founder, say about 18 hours a week, email triage and responses, support team 12 hours a week, content creation, marketing about 15 hours a week. So they deployed proposal automation, first ROI, immediate founder time. That was the win. Step four, deploy in waves, not all at one time. Because if you do everything at one time, there's no way that you could even catch all of the issues. And then now you just created another project because you literally like dumped problems on your desk at once and you don't have the manpower, you don't have any way of really sifting through what's important, what's critical, what needs my attention right now. So you wanted to deploy in waves and not at once. And if you're familiar with the agile project management process, this is really the best way to do it. This is why we break down a specific issue or a person within a department rather than an entire department or a part of an AI process and not the entire AI platform. So this way you can truly focus on what's relevant, what's important, what's critical, right? What makes sense at the time. So that's your win, right? You want to do it in waves and not all at one time. And also you have to understand the limitations that you may have with how many people can look at these things. So if you have 50 things and you only have one person and they only can give you a portion of their time, we're talking about just adding more projects, and that is like feels like instant defeat. We don't want that for you. So the rhythm prevents you from deploying the three new tools simultaneously and having chaos when two of them don't work. Because I see that all the time. It's like, okay, well, we implemented this new AI process and now we're having issues with five different departments. And all of these five different departments are critical because they are reliant on each other, right? And even if you don't have a large company, you can still have different, there's the intake, there's the outtake, there's fulfillment, there's customer service, different aspects of it. So just imagine all of those areas are on fire and they all have issues. They're just not going to work. So the tools that actually work for early stage is not a comprehensive list, just the ones that move the needle. So if we're focusing just on content writing, we're looking at ChatGPT or Claude, how much that costs. We're looking at Jasper, perhaps. You can use it for brand voice, consistency, template, library, bulk content generation. Jasper's been out for a long time. They've understood the assignment, as you can say, and they've made some changes. So it makes it a little bit easier to work with because they have different compartments, a little bit more organization, especially you need organization. So you just want to consider that. And then if you're looking at sales proposals, ChatGPT, the cost we talked about, and that could change. So just keep that in mind. Firefly's AI for meeting transcription, those are pretty critical. You can take those transcriptions and you can turn that into almost anything. You can turn that into a way to really drill down and improve on your products or services. You can focus on different bottlenecks within the company. Transcriptions are really powerful. I remember sitting down and writing meeting notes and like, okay, well, I can't keep track of what everyone said at one time. So we have a couple of highlights that I thought were highlights, but at the same time, someone was talking to me and I'm also writing notes as well and trying to keep track. And then someone else came into the room and they asked for someone else to come out of the room. So now I lost my place. Well, you don't have to worry about those kind of things when you have an AI platform that's going to capture all of the notes. This is where the accuracy part comes in. And it's not a replacement of someone because you don't have someone necessarily that is that efficient, that is not going to miss anything without already doing a recording, right? So this is very, very useful to have an automatic note-taking process. And then for customer support, you can use Intercom, somewhere around $99 to $900 a month, depending on the tier that you choose. And it's used for AI-empowered chatbot for common questions, ticketing, routing, typical deployment, website widget, email integration. This can save anywhere from 15 to 20 hours per week for the first support person. The reason why I think this is so critical is that there are a lot of things that are really not issues. When you get a message that comes through customer support via your chatbot, and the person is like, oh, well, I couldn't find X, Y, and Z. That's what the user says. And you look at it and you say, okay, well, they sent me a screenshot. They actually didn't look in the right place, or this is a user error that maybe not very familiar or familiar enough with your product to understand that they made an error. So if you can cancel out some of those customer issues on the front end, then you can save time on the back end for other things that are way more critical. So I think that it also helps with keeping track of your tickets. How long are your how long have they been open? You know, how old are the tickets? Things like that. That's pretty critical because that's going to make a very angry customer to know that they have been ignored for, you know, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. So ticketing helps to keep track of those things. And Zapier, I like Zapier because Zapier is very friendly and you can use it almost anywhere. It usually interfaces really nicely with most of these other programs. So even if you didn't have a full service platform that does the four things that you feel like you needed to, you can connect really, you know, a couple of other platforms, AI platforms together, help them to talk, think, and act together. So it's almost like you built your own proprietary program without putting all the money into doing that, right? So connecting the tools, automating the workflows, data transfers. And if you feel like this is complicated, you can always hire a consultant to actually help with the transfer portion of it. You know, trigger your event codes. What happens when this person checks this? What happens when this person lands on this part, you know, of my website or the program, or they order something, or what happens if it takes 5 days for them to receive their product opposed to 2 days, things like that. So I'm going to tell you in terms of early stage startups, like what to not use. All right. You don't want to use an enterprise platform that is not flexible. And you don't want to use specialized AI platforms that require heavy customization, because this is where you get tied up into building something behind the scenes that is not helping you to reap your rewards or benefits, right? That's not helping you at all. So you want to make sure that you're not focusing on trying to integrate more than two tools in your first 30 days, especially if you haven't already mastered one, you know, for early stage scale up, I think is really important. And also not buying anything, I would say at a 50K minimum with an annual commitment. This is really important. People get stuck in contracts. They get stuck in these commitments, and your business changes, or maybe your revenue wasn't what you had anticipated, and now you've already committed yourself, you know, to this contract. And even if they give you like a real nice special, a lot of these companies, AI platforms would do that. Hey, for the first 30 days, perhaps it's like, you know, 50% off. And you're like, that's great. But then what happens after that? So just keep that in mind. You want to look at the real cost breakdown for the early stage AI stack. And then you want to see, does this actually make sense to me? And I'm going to show you what that looks like. We'll look at this breakdown again together. And so what we're looking at here is I'm giving you an overview of the numbers and the different platforms as an early stage. If you were to purchase these different platforms, how much they would cost, and then monthly total. The part that I find that a lot of people don't do, a lot of scale ups that they don't do, is they get excited about the capabilities and what it can do, and they don't do a tally of the monthly cost. So they're like $20, not bad, definitely not bad for all the things that it can do. Another $20, not too shabby. $99, okay, we can work with that. But then you start adding everything up together, right? And then if you have other subscriptions outside of this, and then you want to look at your annual costs. So if you're looking at all of these subscriptions, the breakdown is going to be about $1,908 for a full year investment. And you want to look at how much does it save you? About 40 hours a week, roughly, based on this example, 104K annual value at $50 an hour loaded cost. So one of the things that I think it's important that you look at is the integration reality. And here's what you need to know about the integration at an early stage. You want to look at the things that you don't need, you know? I know it sounds weird, but integration is expensive. That's the part that people don't anticipate, especially early scale ups, any type of implementation. They don't think about not just, getting it started, but the integration itself. And it can take engineering time. I remember being on a few projects and we're looking at, okay, so we adopted it, they're looking at the go live date. And then we're like, okay, well, there are several things that have to happen behind the scenes to actually integrate this. It creates dependencies. And at early stage, you usually want data flowing in one direction, right? You want to look at the tool, you want to look at the Slack notification, the human review, that's it. So if you look at an example, ChatGPT generates a proposal draft, Zapier sends a Slack message, new proposal draft ready for review. Let's say founder clicks the link, reviews, edits, and sends it. Sounds familiar, right? So no deep integration here, no custom APIs, no data syncing infrastructure. And this is enough to solve about 80% of the time while still keeping operational simplicity. So the one time that you should integrate early, if your CRM is already your source of truth, like if it's Salesforce, HubSpot, Pipedrive, then route AI workflows through it. So a good example is like HubSpot, Zapier plus ChatGPT workflow. We've talked about that, right? And you want to be able to move your deals to proposal stage in HubSpot, and then you want Zapier to trigger the fires, ChatGPT to generate proposal drafting using company data from HubSpot. Slack notifies the salesperson. So nothing gets dropped. That's the main thing, as an early stage, is that you can actually set yourself back as an early stage integration if you are letting things drop in between the cracks. We hear it all the time, something came through and the salesperson didn't pick it up, for a few days later. Well, it became stale now. That person may have decided to go somewhere else. You could have lost the sale. But if you were on it and you seen when it came through and you reached out or you got that person to your booking calendar or you're doing an in-person meetup, that closes the gap. And so that gives the salesperson a chance to review it, send something manually from HubSpot or automate it. So this keeps everything in HubSpot, your system of record. So I just want you to understand that I'm not trying to sell you on HubSpot. HubSpot may not work for you, but if you listen and watch this process that I'm showing you, what you should understand is that it's going to eliminate duplicated efforts, is going to eliminate wasted time, right? It also gives you a central location. There are a lot of folks who came from corporate or executive, and like these systems were robust. Everything was in one place. It was amazing. You could find everything you needed when you needed it. And then of course there are some systems that were not amazing. You're like, who brought this? Oh my gosh, this doesn't do anything we want it to do. But the main point that I'm saying is that if you have everything central, you have a bird's eye view on what's happening within every phase of the business, right? So you don't have to build a custom integration layer. You don't have to write any code. You can use Zapier to make the integration, and you can keep it simple. I think that's the biggest thing. Like we have stuff that's like really complicated. This one is connected to that one, that's connected to this one. Maybe you don't even need all of that. Maybe you just need really two solid programs that speak and connect to each other. The main thing is that when you open up that computer and you start looking at stuff, how many different systems do you have to go to collect the information that's really relevant for success? So you want to measure in one way. Did it save meaningful time, like in the first 30 days of integration? This is success metrics for early stage. This is what you want to be looking at. You want to look at what your wins are. 5 to 10 hours per week, say per person, you won. Let's keep it, right? 2 to 5 hours per week save, probably keep it, but let's watch it. We don't want to get too excited. Under 2 hours per week, let it go. It's not worth it. It's not worth the mental load. We probably spent way more time trying to tinker with it and figure it out and make it better. And we just need to go ahead and cancel it, exit, right? Let it go. So that's it. Not is this helping us scale, not is this making us more sophisticated, but just like, did it save us time? You also track the adoption rate. Are people actually using it? And if you don't have a team, are you using it? Are you just letting it sit there? That means you don't need it. It doesn't have a function for you. Quality maintenance, did this introduce errors or quality issues? If it's creating more issues or more problems, it's not worth keeping. Morale, does the team feel like using it, or does it feel forced? Or do you feel like you have to make yourself use it, to get to certain parts of success? Then it's probably just not the right program for you. Make sense? All right, let's get to the reality check, right? So we're still focusing on scaling companies, and we're talking about system integration, right? The reality check, what that looked like, whether you have 50 to 50 to 500 people, what your budget constraints look like, the scaling AI framework. The first pillar was integrated platforms, not point solutions. And the shift is from early stage to scaling, right? You're looking at, like, does this work for you? Did this save you time? Was it adaptable? Did it help make things more efficient? Did it help make you money? And so in this particular scenario, HubSpot probably is the most realistic choice for scaling companies. And I want to explain why, because HubSpot is not just a CRM, it's an operating system for your sales, your marketing, and your customer service operations. So what you get with HubSpot, AI layered, powered by their GPT integration, because it's already baked in, the GPT part. You don't have to bounce out, go somewhere else, and then come back in. And I've seen a lot of GPT integrations that are just no good. I'm like, I'd rather just go straight to the source, because the outputs, they're not good. I don't know what the handshake is or what level of the program that was integrated. Is it an old GPT or is it a new GPT? And I look at that as well when I'm helping to make a selection process. If it's going to cost me more work for me to have to go to an original, uh, to see what their outputs are, then I don't really need it, which means I don't need this program, because this thing that you said that was supposed to benefit me, it's not benefiting me. It's taking way more time. So you have to look at that, your integration, your proprietary models, and your breakdown, and what the real implementation looks like from one week to the next, right? And so these are the different layers that I was just mentioning to you about the HubSpot AI layer, the real implementation part of it, what that looks like. And if you have an old stack, how do they connect from one program to the next? Is it manual? See, a lot of people, some of them do most of their business actually on their phone, because it's easier to navigate from one program to the next. The part that they probably don't anticipate is that it actually takes way more time for you to have to manually type things into your cell phone, opposed to going to a desktop and then having that seamless integration. So I think it's just really not effective. And the numbers also support that as well, right? And then you have the breakdown, data migration, from how much history, what that looks like from one month to the next month. And you have your total breakdown. So just keep in mind that these numbers and the percentages and metrics may not be 100% applicable based on the size of your business, what your ARR looks like, what your output looks like. So just keep that in mind. But if you're focusing on the system and how that could work for your business, I think that's the real matchup. That's the part that's going to be most critical and relevant to what you're looking for. All right. So we look at all of these different pieces of information, and I know you're probably like thinking like, well, Simone, this is elaborate. No one has it. And if you're a data person and a metrics person, the other part will be like, oh yes, well, we've got that. We've got a lot of those actually. We have Excel spreadsheets. We have it here. We have it there. So it's a good breakdown on what you're looking at in terms of what admin looks like, your response time, forecasting. You need all this information really to make the best decisions and the best choices. So as we continue to dive into our AI adoption playbook masterclass, I want to focus also on moving through the other different platforms that I mentioned. We talked about HubSpot, also Salesforce, introducing Einstein AI as well, and what this breakdown looks like and what you get with the different programs, why it may be important. The reason why I'm spending so much time on this is because we're breaking down the intricate levels on what means what. How does AI adoption impact the different areas, right? And so giving you real world example will show what that impact looks like. It gets you thinking like, okay, well, I get what you're saying, Simone. So you mean when I do X, Y, and Z here, this is what I could be missing out on. Or if I implement this program or adopt it here with AI, these are the benefits that I could be saving. And then the next step would be for you to do your research to make sure that it's a good fit and to make sure that it actually just kind of makes sense. Now, a lot of folks like Einstein analytics for its predictive analytics, anomaly detection. Anomaly detection is so good, and I'll tell you why. It kind of lets you know, like, which direction that you want to go into. You're like, oh my goodness. Okay, I'm seeing more than breadcrumbs. I'm seeing good direction in terms of what I should focus on, right? What could be beneficial to me. Natural language reporting. You can ask it a question about your data. A lot of platforms are like that, but this one is a little bit more intuitive, and why you would want to deploy them at different stages. So I want to talk a little bit also about why deploying Salesforce at a scaling stage is something to look at. Because usually you don't, right? You move to Salesforce when you're like 200 plus people, or you've outgrown HubSpot, or you've already you looked at Salesforce and legacy adoption. And then you think, okay, well, maybe Einstein is worth activating. So enterprise SaaS company of about 12 million ARR, roughly around 180 people. They were on Salesforce legacy from a Series A investment. And Einstein deployment looks like this for them. Lead scoring, identified top 20% of leads that converted at 40% versus 12% for the rest. So that gives them more information to pull from, more direct access, right? Deal analytics identify that deals with 5+ stakeholders, touchdown, closed at 65% versus 35% without forecasting. That helped to improve accuracy from 71 to 89%. It's a nice jump. So implementation, 8 weeks, around 45K. Mostly costs about $30 per user for Einstein. That could change, but these are result focus that I'm showing you, right? Which improved forecast accuracy, saved about 2 to 3 weeks of quarterly planning cycles, and that's about 1,200 hours of executive time per year saved, plus better visibility into the pipeline health. It's a very critical position to have. So let's look at Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365. This is a dark horse, you know. If you're already in the Microsoft ecosystem, Office, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Copilot is powerful because it has context, right? And what Copilot does across the across, I thought something went down on the computer. I said, "Hey, wait a minute." Okay, but we're still good. So when Copilot, what that does across the Microsoft ecosystem, if we look at Word, draft documents, summarizes, suggest edits, and in Excel, we create formulas, analyze data, generate generate visualizations, and then in PowerPoint, generate slides, suggest designs. You know, if we're familiar with it, most of us could even take meetings from our phone and still give a really robust presentation on the go. But the reason why it matters at scaling is because you are already paying for Microsoft 365, right? You already have access to it. And then Copilot is about $20 per user on top of that. So it automates the knowledge work that eats productivity. So for an example, technical services company of about 120 people rolled out Copilot to all users. Here's the impact. We're focusing on the impact, right? Meeting summarizations. Um, Sales teams no longer need to spend 5 minutes writing CRM notes after every call. And it probably takes more than 5 minutes really to write notes, but they don't give you a lot of time. I want you to do things quickly. With the meeting summarization, this makes it more efficient and accurate. I talked about that earlier, right? Having to take meeting notes and stuff. And Copilot does it. Proposal generation, teams use Word and Copilot for proposal drafts versus like a blank slate. So that makes a big difference. And then Excel analysis. You can finance team to create dashboards 3 times faster. So the thing about this is that they're already working with your data. They already have it. This is different from feeding it information. And so it's collecting all of this, which means that you don't have to take additional steps to connect the dots and to put one program with another program to make sure that it works. So if we're looking at time saved, roughly about 6 to 8 hours per month, we're also looking at about 960 hours per month, about 47K month in loaded labor costs. So again, the math, you know, that works. Look at how much time you're actually saving. So this is not just someone talking about what's actually happening, but you're seeing exactly what part is being impacted, right? And it already existed. Copilot is already there for scale ups. So it saves you quite a bit of time. If you're looking at meeting summarization that I talked about, the proposal generation, Excel analysis, and the monthly costs, 2,400 was $20 per user times 120 users. And again, the example that we're focusing on is technical service company. And they had about 120 people. So this made sense for them, you know, and even if you have a smaller team. I worked with a group of about 3 people, and they had Copilot, and it was seamless for them. They were connecting with each other in real time, sending updates, creating minutes. The reason why it was also even more important because there was fewer of them, fewer people on the team, and you want to make sure that you're connecting accordingly and that everyone is in sync with each other. So relevant, right? How much hours you can save, monthly value. So if you were thinking about it and wasn't and trying to figure out like, what does this mean? How is this going to impact me? What does this look like? This is exactly what this looks like. Just showing you the numbers, right? So we want to look at the data quality prerequisite. And, you know, here's the honest truth about this is that if you don't fix your data, no AI platform will save you. And this is where most scaling companies go wrong because they're so focused on the integration and the implementation that they're not looking at the actual data. They're thinking, okay, when we get new data in, we're just going to go in and make those updates. We're just going to go ahead and fix that. But you don't realize how great of an issue that you're giving yourself. I remember before moving over to a new program, the project was to have all hands on deck. Go back in and look at that current data and see, does it actually make sense? Is it missing something? And if it's missing something, make sure you clean it up. If you can't, either delete the file, combine the file, or create an entirely new file so that when we're using this data, it actually makes sense. Because you can have numbers that look horrible, but the data is inaccurate, which makes the data look horrible. And now you're making decisions on just bad quality data. So the reality is that, CRM, it's been around forever, right? And will continue to be around because it can be a central hub to collect all of your information. So 30 to 40% of customer records, they were missing like key fields. Healthcare records, missing like male, female, other. They're missing ages. They're missing pertinent information that is needed to make a proper healthcare treatment plan, right? Not valid data. Duplicated records, old data. Perhaps we're talking about deceased members, or people who are out of care. The data is not valid anymore. So when you think like that's just how CRM data is, that's not true. It's not. It means it's a broken CRM. It's a broken CRM. People come in, you have high turnover sometimes. You have people that don't understand the CRM program completely. They put in partial information or they're rushing. They don't come back to that profile and complete it and make updates. So when you layer AI on top of broken data, then you get something that is not valuable, something that is not usable. I remember like just the data cleanup used to be extremely expensive, right? Because you have to go into all of the records. You're thinking about how many hours that someone has to spend or take looking at each individual record that has accumulated, let's say over 10, 20, 40 years, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of information that we're going to have to reevaluate or delete, because it's just not valuable. And I want to look at an example of a tech scale company, had about 15,000 accounts in CRM. And when I asked like how many of these are actually active, like they didn't know, right? Because they didn't run an audit. You need to run a data audit. So 2,000 had no activity for 24 months, and 1,800 had incomplete company information. 1,200 had like wrong contact information. We talked about that earlier, right? This information is just not valid. So out of the 15,000 records, maybe 9,000 were reliably useful. So when they deployed AI lead scoring, it was scored based on 40% garbage data. Garbage data is no good. We can't do it, right? So the fix is that you have to audit your data every roughly 2 to 3 weeks. You go through and identify what's broken. I remember long before this, and in my early years of CRM, any accounts that I would touch, I would before we had like a tickler file, a follow-up file. You know what I'm talking about when I say a tickler file. But before we had that, we would just write them out on paper or spreadsheets and check them off and write down when was the last time that we reviewed the file. And I would make sure that I would go through the file to double check my work. What was I missing? Did I enter the pertinent information that was valid at the time? Were there any new rules or regulations that had changed that I needed to add information to? So in short, all I'm saying is that you need to audit your data, whether you're a really small company or you're a big company, it's always going to be relevant, so that you can fix what you have and you can implement ongoing validation, good information. Because you never know, like when you may have to make this shift and you're like, okay, well, my data is no good. I can't use this. So you want to look at these things: completeness, accuracy, consistency. If you have any duplications, how many exist, the governance. So you want to think about how do we have a standard process before technology. People always think that if I get this technology and I get this AI platform in, it's just going to fix everything, right? Everything is going to change. But this is probably the most important pillar because if you get it wrong and you implement AI on top of chaos, here's what I see with scaling companies, sales teams, they have 8 different ways of running a discovery call. Why? I like to do it that way. And the company says, oh, we're trying to, have autonomy and allow them to kind of run their own thing. No, we kind of need to have consistency, right? We need to have a standard process. Customer service has 4 different onboarding workflows. The reason why this stuff is important is because some folks could be missing steps that are truly critical to the data process. And if you have like operations, 3 different ways of tracking customer health, okay, then I say, well, let's add AI. And now you have 8 different AI processes, right? Operating on 8 different data models. And it's not leverage, it's just chaos because everyone has decided to do their own thing. Create a standard process, make sure that everyone follows it, audit the process consistently because the pain part is what you're going to pay in time, what you're going to pay in money because the records are not matching up, they're not valid, they're not accurate. So the rule is to standardize first and then you automate second. You have to make sure that that is together. And the way you standardize your process is your first step is that you have to document your current state. Not the should be, but the actual current state. Like, what are you seeing? What are the leaders seeing in the documentation? Um, Not what they would like to see, right? So everyone's going to be honest about their approach. It's not about pointing fingers and things like that, but it's about getting to a place of consistency and making sure that everybody's on the same page with the data. Because when you bring in AI and your data isn't good and you're layering it in, it's all going to show. And then this is where the finger pointing comes in at, right, folks? This is when you start realizing, okay, well, this particular department like had a process that wasn't very effective. It didn't really help people. And we're going to need to change things. So you definitely want to look at what that means as you change the data. Okay, so now I want to look at the change management reality. And a lot of folks, we change things, right? But we don't always talk about the process to changing, what needs to happen, right? What does a true change management process look like? And that's executive sponsorship, making sure that we're not just approving CEO publicly, department champions in each department, someone's in charge of that, and making sure that what's supposed to happen is actually happening. Quick wins, making sure that we're letting that be known so that everyone's on the same page with what's changing and what's happening. And embedded training, like training is ongoing. We think that, okay, well, we had one big training. We taught everybody how to do it. We had 2 days of training. People had 2 whole days. You're like, that's great. Like they need more. It has to be ongoing. It has to be consistent. It has to be embedded into the process, right? So you don't just teach in one big room and think that everyone's going to get it, but then it's also micro training as well. You have some departments, they may need specialized training. One department is not doing what the other department is doing, and they're not supposed to, right? They have different functions. So just making sure that they are all on the same page and training is consistent and it's accurate, and you have a standard for training as well. That's going to be important. Makes sense? If you have any questions, I would love for you to go ahead and pop that in the chat. Let me know if this makes sense to you or if you're at a crossroads for anything that we are covering right now. So when we talk about Pillar 5, the integration architecture at scale, by now you have multiple tools that we have shared, right? And they need to talk to each other. We talked about the early stage Zapier. We talked about manual reviews and scaling. So one tool is your system of record, right? And then everything else connects to it. Some people have competing programs and competing platforms. So like they have like four main programs, and you're like, well, which one is priority? And you need to establish that, like which one is more important. And the reason why you need to do that, because this is how you standardize everything. What is your primary? Like what's the main program that everybody needs to go to at once? And then what's your secondary or tertiary programs, right? And then what that looks like. All right, so we have spent a lot of time on small businesses, scale ups. And so now I want to focus on enterprise teams. Okay. And enterprise teams, the reason why they get lost is because the teams are so large, right? And they have legacy systems and they have multiple governance processes that they have to focus on. So on average, you have like maybe 500 plus people, often thousands. It could be anywhere from 50 million ARR to maybe about 500 million plus, right? Legacy systems, talking about SAP, Oracle, Workday, Salesforce, built over 10 years, lots of data, lots of stuff to look at, complex compliance requirements, right? GDPR, HIPAA, SOC, to industry specific. Lots of things to consider. But your constraint isn't, can we save time? Because you've already done that in different stages. You should have already done that like early on, right? Your constraint is, can we transform operations while still maintaining control? And this is a big one. This is where your employees are like, oh, they want to control everything. They want to know everything that we're doing. But yes, this is so necessary. Control, compliance, super critical, right? And then you'll learn how to make improvements within that for sure. So we are now focusing on the AI enterprise for your AI compliance. And let me just change a few things and make sure we're looking at all the perfect stuff. Okay. So if you're joining us here for the AI Playbook, we are now on the Enterprise AI framework. You're definitely going to want to listen in for this. So what I've been doing is doing a deep dive and breaking everything down, right? So we're talking about now at the AI enterprise level that it's not about tools, it's about transformation. And the enterprise AI framework, it's really about governance before deployment. So this is a non-negotiable, folks. And this is where we get it wrong. You're in a legal compliance heck for years, right? The question isn't like, should we do governance? And I've said this before, but it's who's on the governance committee and what are the rules? So we're looking at structure, and most enterprises, they need three levels. Level one is strategic oversight. That's the executive steering committee, right? The who is CTO, chief data officer, chief risk officer, VP of department using AI, or general counsel, right? And frequency is probably monthly, or it could be biweekly. So the decisions that they're focusing on is which departments get AI first, right? How much are we spending? What are the risk tolerance levels? And how do we measure success? And then for the level two, that is going to be the tactical review. So who's going to architect it, right? Where are the data engineers, the business leads, the compliance officer? And we're looking at frequency, weekly during pilots, bi-weekly at scale. And the decisions, what that looks like is like, does this tool meet governance requirements? Is the data prepared? Are we ready for testing? And does this pass compliance? And the who is the department leads, data stewards, tool owners, your super users. And this is probably daily to weekly in terms of frequency. And then how do we use this tool, right? Who has access? What do we monitor in terms of quality? What training do we need? And the governance questions that you have to answer before you deploy a single AI tool, it has to document answers like this. Data usage. The data is allowed to be used for training. That's the question. Can you? What data is off limits? This is proprietary. We're definitely not going to use this in AI. These are the questions that you need to have in advance. How do we classify data? An example, customer health data, HIPAA regulated, cannot be used for training. Product usage data, anonymized, can be customer names, right? We're changing names perhaps. And then model validation, like who validates that AI model is accurate? What's the acceptable error rate? How often do we test? A good example could be like lead scoring model must be 85% accurate on test data. So if you're implementing quality assurance into this, if you have that built in, that's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of headache because you're going to be monitoring it from a quality assurance perspective. This is outside of what your AI implementation or integration looks like. That means that you have a quality department that is focusing on what lead scoring looks like and accuracy. So if you're going in, let's say with 90% accuracy, and then you're looking at what implementing an AI tool or platform looks like, and what that accuracy now changes to with that implementation. Now you have quality assurance data that can go back and train the teams, say, hey, this is what we need to look for. This is what you have to focus on. You can't say this, you don't do this, you don't implement this information. This is a must have. So these are the kind of things that need to happen consistently. And then let's say if accuracy drops below 80%, what does this mean? Do you pause until it's remedied? Do you continue under specific parameters? And then you also want to look at bias and fairness, like how do we check for bias? This is a conversation that comes up more often than most may realize when we talk about AI platforms, because it is now everyone's responsibility to check for bias, right? And what's your policy if we find bias? These are the things that you already want to have predetermined and you want to evaluate. This is where a really good ethical compliancy department comes in at. You want to make sure that you're checking everything off because this is not only just about what's right and what's wrong, but this is also about what legal issues can you bring to your front door if you're not looking at biases and if you don't have a really tight policy for that. And then who decides if an outcome is bias? So a really good example could be lead scoring that shows racial bias is rejected. Hiring that shows gender bias is paused until fixed. And we've seen that in reality where certain people receive a certain score based on their application, based on gender roles, based on some historical information in the background that was pulled from an application. So you want to make sure that you really keep this in perspective and actually keep a list and a department that stays on top of these things. And you want to audit and be able to explain it. Like, can we explain why AI made a specific decision? You have to defend those decisions. Can we audit who used AI and when? How long do we keep the audits? These are things that you need to evaluate. And also you need to look at any government regulations that actually determine what those might be for your state or your country. So we can, example, maintain audit logs, let's say for 3 years, or every decision made by AI must be an explanation a human can understand. So there's an additional step, right? There's a human evaluation that occurs within that step. And with all the dashboards that we have now, we have checklists and you can check off, Samantha in compliance, check this off on such and such a date. It reached this particular scoring, and now it reaches whatever the next steps are, whatever makes sense, or whatever is applicable based on the guidelines, right? Does that make sense so far? So when it comes down to enterprises, things get a little bit tricky, right? It's still doable in terms of it making sense to incorporate and adopt AI, but the stakes are a little bit higher. We need to evaluate things in a much, much different way. And so I want to focus on how we phase things out before we wrap up today's free masterclass on the AI adoption playbook. Okay. And for those of you who have sent me some information asking in which ways can we work together, you can visit my website at apelli.com, aepeli.com. We have a few flagship programs that meet you where you are. We also have a video marketing momentum method program that's coming up as free training. So if you want to learn more about that, again, it's Apelli, aepeli.com. And also, I will put that in the comments for you. Okay. Thanks so much for staying with me as we continue this training on our AI playbook. All right. So we are now focusing on the pillar 2 for the enterprise, right? Phased out rollout with obsessive measurement. So critical. The worst thing that an enterprise can do is deploy AI across all departments simultaneously. And that's because if it fails, people adopt randomly. Quality issues go unnoticed until they're systematic, right? I'm sorry, systemic. And by the time that you know it's broken, you've already wasted about 2 million and lost organizational trust and the ability to perhaps re-implement a new AI tool or AI platform. That percentage goes down greatly. So the right approach is that you want to have one high value use case, nail it, measure it, evangelize it, repeat it, the phased rollout structure. And this is what this looks like. So for the phase 1, selection and planning, and we have an outline, and that could change based on the enterprise, the industry that you're in, right, and what your specific goals are. But this is a great outline to focus on for right now. And you want to choose the one case that has clear ROI, saves X hours or makes Y revenue, has engaged department leader, has good data quality, right, has clear success metric. So not all AI for general productivity, right? Yes, AI reduced customer support responses time from 8 hours to 2 hours in customer success department. So you are measuring baseline metrics, response time, 8 hours average. First contact resolution, 35%. Customer satisfaction, 7.2 out of 10, let's say. Ticket volume, about 200 per month. So as we go to the next phase 2 in the pilot, you deploy one team, track everything, leave nothing out. Anything that you think, oh, we don't really need that, document it. Document it and reference it and track it. Okay. So you want to deploy AI chatbots to support, let's say, a team of 20 people handling 200 support tickets per month. Weekly measurement, adoption rate. Are people using it? Performance. Is response time actually faster? You don't want to deploy something that adds more time to the process. Quality. Are resolutions correct? Sentiment. Does the customer experience really improve, right? So week 5 to 6, what that looks like is that there's a 30% adoption. So average response time is 7.5 hours, maybe slight improvement. Some miscategorized tickets, week 7 to 8, 55% adoption, response time, 6 hours. So fewer miscategorized issues, right? So team learning, we look at that, 75% adoption by week 9 to 10. So your response time, 4 hours, let's say. And we're breaking this down because we want to make sure that we're documenting every area of the business. You want to look at this because you're going to make an assessment as to whether or not it's working or if it's not working. So based on this use case, AI chatbot to reduce customer support responses from 8 hours to 2 hours. And this is what this looks like. A baseline, week 6, week 8, week 10, week 12, and week 16. So by week 13 to 14, you're handling a complex issue. Add human handoff logic. That's always going to be critical. Retain model, right? Week 15 to 16, adoption stays 88% response. So that's about 2.2 hours. And you've proven with team A, now roll it out with team B. That's the biggest thing, is that you wanted to have a team that you can document, you can evaluate, you can roll it out with before you move on. Because this way you'll know maybe this is not the right platform for us. Maybe this is just not the right industry for the type of success that we are hoping to achieve. So you want to look at those things. What does your ROI look like? And then evangelize it. You tell the company, here's what we did in support, and we're doing it next in sales. And then now you have a game plan and an outline in terms of what you're looking for. So that's a good implementation strategy, right? And this is where enterprise AI actually gets really complicated, because you have SAP or Oracle or a 20-year-old custom system. You can't just rip it out. That does so much damage for the business. So you need AI to work with it. You need to figure out what can be interfaced with it, which something that makes sense, right? So the reality of legacy system integration is that legacy systems were built for external APIs. They're not cloud first. Oh, they're not cloud first. You can't see it anywhere and everywhere. Sometimes you have to go to the computer for that one computer, right? And this is where things are really changing, and most companies are cloud first. I remember, I think it's funny because a lot of companies say AI first, but I remember when cloud first was the thing to be. You're like, wait a minute. Cloud first means that I am not tethered to the computer that is about 2 hours away from the office, in the back, on the third floor, next to the stinky break room. Okay, good to know. I can break out my computer and I can jump on the legacy system program, and I can get the information that I need and still keep it shipping. So they don't have webhooks or event streams, and getting AI to work with them is hard. So that's the biggest difference with some of the legacy systems. But with the ones that I'm talking about, with Salesforce and SAP, they have already solved those problems for you. So you build a middle layer that sits between the legacy system and AI tools, right? The SAP ERP legacy, middleware, MuleSoft, Apache, Apache, Niffy or similar. You want to look at how it reads the SAP data, how it transforms it, cleans it, sends it to the AI tools, and then receives results from AI and then writes back to SAP. So AI tools, cloud-based. An example could be an enterprise with SAP ERP. SAP stores all customer data every 6 hours. Middleware extracts the customer data, right? So this way you get a chance to see exactly what that looks like. And the pillar 4 is change management. This is the hardest part. This is the hardest part because you've already built the infrastructure. You've already done the integration, and you've already set governance. But now you get like 2,000 people to use it. And this is where most enterprise AI projects fail, because the statistics is 70% of enterprise transformations fail due to poor change management, not technology. Poor change management, not having your champions in place, your change champions, your leaders, right? And also not understanding the why and the impact that it has when you implement this AI platform. So change management is hard for enterprise. People have been doing the same thing for 10 years. They have built habits. They know the old way. They're productive with the old way. They're thinking, why would I change that? Right? So the new system, it creates uncertainty. Well, I still have a job. Well, I look silly if I don't understand the new system. What if the AI recommends something wrong? And everyone's like, well, there is human oversight, right? Then you look at it and you're like, yeah, but I didn't understand what I was looking at, right? So resistance is rational, and it's not the people that they just don't get it and they don't understand. It's that change is actually risky and very time consuming. So the different departments have different needs. Sales uses AI one way, support uses it another, finance another way. So you can't have one training program. The four-part change management framework, it works like this. I want to make sure I'm showing that to you. Okay, great. So the four-part, and if you're here with me, what we're looking at is the four-part change management framework. And so part one is the executive sponsorship, visible and consistent. The CEO or department head must use AI systems publicly. It means that they reference it in meetings. They ask questions that show that they understand. They celebrate early wins and never go back to the old way, even if it's inconvenient. So bad sponsorship is we're deploying AI. Here's how to use it. Questions like, where is the information, right? So good sponsorship is I've been using lead scoring AI for 2 weeks or a month. It identified a segment we completely missed. And here's what happened. So it tells the story, right? It shows the impact. It shows that they actually used it and what that impact looks like for an enterprise business. And then part two is department champions and training. You notice a theme, right? No matter what stage you're in, I'm saying, look, you need a department champions and training. You identify 1 to 2 people per department who are respected by their peers, early adopters who are not resistant to change, good explainers, they understand, curious folks, they want to get in the system, they want to understand, how it works, what's the impact, and you give them 40 hours of training versus 4 hours for everyone else. So that means that you have the sales rep come down, you have the training department come down from the AI platform, and they get deep into the weeds, and you break them up by departments. And if they have enough people that can train them, you would even separate them. So if you have 4 people, maybe you have 2 people and 1 trainer so that they can really soak in this information so that it makes sense to them. Because access to the tool early will really help them. They can start brainstorming, well, this is how we use it now, and then here are the changes. Here's the impact for applying this AI platform. And it's time to practice and troubleshoot. So authority to help their department. Then they become the go-to experts. How powerful is that? So a good example, 200-person sales organization, right? You pick 4 sales representatives who are your champions. They get trained on the tool for 2 weeks. They discover the lead score is helpful. Maybe they discover it's confusing or it doesn't work. Maybe they need a different approach to how they would apply a specific process, right? So the best way to integrate it into the workflow is that they get to write notes, they get to actually have that hands-on experience, and then they train the other 196 salespeople because now they get it. They truly understand. And you break that down even to smaller groups from a peer and not from a corporate training department who doesn't completely understand exactly how you use the different elements within your system or your program and what that really means. Like, yes, they understand it in your department and hey, here's a company we work for that's similar, but it's not the same as, look, here's your company and you get it and you're going to train other people to make sure that they understand adoption as well. So it can be much, much higher. So you don't teach the tool in isolation, you teach it as part of the job. So what's not good training is 1 hour, a system overview for all 200 salespeople, and then telling them to go figure it out. What's good training is part of your new sales process, documentation, step 3 review, AI lead score, you look at the lead score anywhere from 1 to 100, right? You read the reasoning below the score. You decide if you agree or disagree. And then you embed the help in the tool itself. You can have a chat bot that links to some of your support group so that they can answer questions within. Hey, I'm in this page and I don't understand why this is not working for X, Y, and Z. And then someone can respond back, or you can build it in with an automatic reply based on what's supposed to happen. So there are different ways where you can internalize some of those support platforms as well. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. So we covered a lot today on the AI playbook and adoption. And we also covered all of the different areas in terms of startups, small businesses, scale ups, and enterprises as well, just to make sure that you understand what is different for each stage and how you would apply them. And in terms of using legacy programs or using a new program and the impact that it would have on your business. So what I do want to cover before we wrap up are a few common gotchas, okay? And I'll tell you why these are so important, because we're in it. We think that when I say we're in it, we're looking at the different programs, often receiving some type of a presentation, and we think that, okay, this is it, right? But what we don't understand is that there might be a hidden gotcha. What's the hidden gotcha that we want to make sure that we avoid? So I'm going to share that with you before we get ready to wrap up today. And thanks for being here as we went through our AI playbook and covering the different departments and industries. It's been exciting for me because I love digging into this. And I think it's important also for you to uncover different aspects of what's relevant, what's not, what to focus on besides the new shiny AI tool, because there's always going to be one coming out, right? So some of the gotcha, measuring the wrong metrics. And I think the problem is that you measure AI adoption rate and you declare victory at, let's say, 60%, but maybe the tool isn't actually moving business metrics. So the fix is that you want to measure what matters. Early stage hours saved, yes or no? Scaling revenue impact, faster sales, better retention, enterprise business transformation. So another gotcha is implementing without process change. The biggest problem here is that you add AI to a broken process. You now have an efficient broken process. Not helpful. The fix is to standardize first, automate second, always. The third gotcha is data debt. The problem is AI on garbage data. We spend a lot of time here because I see it happen so often. And it is one of the biggest reasons to not making the best decision for your business. AI produces garbage. You blame it on the AI, right? The fix is that before deploying any AI platform, you want to audit your data. You want to fix what's broken. The gotcha four is underestimating change management. The problem is that you spend 80% of budget on technology, 20% on management, adoption at 40%. The fix is spend 20% on technology, 80% on change management, executive sponsorship, champions, training, celebration of wins. We recently went over all of those things as well. So gotcha five is building proprietary AI too early. The problem is that early stage companies with 30 people, they want to build a custom ML model. They see it happening around them. It makes it seem so easy, right? So they're thinking, I've got to have my own. But 18 months later, still it's not done. Your competitor is using ChatGPT already 2 years ahead, right? The fix, you use an existing AI. Only build custom If you have, let's say, 500 plus more people, you have exhausted existing solutions, the ROI justifies the 12 to 18 investment. What a lot of people have realized is that they have created a really fast program, and they think that, okay, well, this is mine, but it's not yours. It lives within another program. You may not be able to monetize the way that you think that you could. Who owns the rights to this particular program that has been created? So there are a lot of different things that we need to focus on that you need to consider first before moving forward, right? And do you have dedicated ML engineers? Because they are expensive. Even the ones that said, hey, I do it on a project basis or a consultant basis, they still are expensive. Love to use an ML engineer when it makes sense, right? So the Gotcha 6 tool sprawl. The problem is that you picked 8 different AI tools. Now you have data in 8 places. Where do you go? Your team is confused about which tool to use. Integration nightmares. The fix: start with one ecosystem, either HubSpot, Salesforce, Microsoft, and then you add carefully. This gives you the opportunity to really learn like what you need to add. Some people add too much at one time. And then you realize, no, I don't even need that. I'm okay. So gotcha 7 is not having an escalation path. Not having an escalation path, it means that people stop trusting AI, right? They build in a human override from day one. So Sales AI recommends that you don't pursue. You can override. Support AI routes to the wrong team. You can reassign. Finance AI flags, suspicious transactions, you can review. So always have a human in the loop. Always have an employee that's going to review these documents, these steps, because AI by itself is not efficient, even all the outputs and the prompts and the codes that you're connecting, that requires someone to thoughtfully put in information that makes sense for the business and the outcome that they're hoping to achieve. So what you have learned and you now understand is why most AI adoptions fail, right? Wrong tool for the wrong stage, poor management. What each stage needs from a leadership perspective. Early stage, move fast visibly, celebrate wins, model adoption. Scaling, standardize first, build systems, make people heroes. Small businesses, evaluate which legacy systems can actually work for you. Enterprise, govern rigorously, pilot ruthlessly, and evangelize publicly. So the way that small businesses can win with mature platforms like HubSpot, Salesforce, and the specific ROI metrics that they prove. You want to look at specific ROI metrics that can be proven and documented, something that you can evaluate from. And which platforms to use: the HubSpot, Salesforce, Microsoft Custom. We talked about those areas as well. And how to implement at each stage with real times and costs. And also how to measure success. Business metrics, not tool adoption. I think the most important part is that the core principle is that you want to match your solution to your reality, not what the big companies are doing and not what your competitor is doing, and not what seems to be like advanced, like, oh, this is something our company wouldn't do, so now we're going to look really advanced. You have to match it to where your company actually is. And remember that technology is 30% of AI success. Leadership's approach is 70%. So your job as a leader is to move fast, early stage, build systems, scaling or govern relentlessly, right? Enterprises, that's what you need. The tool you pick is important, but how you lead to change is like everything. You want to identify which stage you're in, then implement the first action. In early stage this week, you can implement like one tool and think about what that looks like for you. And that could be something like Claude or ChatGPT, Fireflies, Notion, and then try it for one process and measure it. And then if you're scaling this month, I want you to audit your data, find the biggest gaps, plan the fix, and pick your primary platform, whether it's HubSpot or Salesforce. And then for enterprise this month, build your governance framework. Those are the critical honest and important questions that you have to answer before you deploy any AI platform, and get the buy-in from the steering committee, because you want to be able to plan your pilot. You want to do one thing well and then iterate. So I have time to answer one question. And the question that I have here is, we're early stage and don't have a CRM yet. Should we pick one before deploying AI? So I think this is a good question. And here's my recommendation. If you have less than 1 million ARR, probably not, right? Use free tools, HubSpot, CRM, Notion, spreadsheets, and single function AI tools. Your bottleneck is getting to the product market fit, not CRM sophistication. So if you have 1 million plus ARR, yes, pick HubSpot or Pipedrive, then build AI on top of that. And the reason is because you are likely to stay early stage for only about 12 to 18 more months. And a really good CRM that scales to the next stage is better than optimizing for the perfect early stage setup. So I hope that answers that question. And that is all that we have time for today. I had a great time. I hope that you also were able to pull from the information that we shared today, and that you have a better understanding of where you are in which stage and what's so completely relevant and important as you're going through these steps, right? Like what your time constraint is. What does that mean to you? Because all of these things are really critical during the decision-making process, and then whether or not you should actually implement the different AI platforms or even single tools. So the final thoughts that I have that I want to share with you is that you have a roadmap now, right? You understand the leadership principles that matter. And you know why mature platforms work for small businesses. You understand the 3 stages of what each needs, and you have the platforms to deploy. The only thing left is execution. And execution requires just one thing: start with one constraint. If you're early stage, what one thing can you automate in the next 7 days? If you're scaling, what's broken in your data? When can you fix it? And if you're enterprise, who's going to lead the governance committee? Pick one small thing, do it really well, then iterate. That's how you win with AI, not by having the fanciest tool, not by copying what everyone else is doing, but by understanding where you actually are and what your actual constraint is, and leading your folks through change with clarity and confidence. So we're wrapping up today. Thank you so much for being here. This is Simone with Apelli signing off. And until the next time, take care, folks.